Okay, it's a new day.
It's been many new days.
It's been many new days. I think the last video we were mentioning how we've managed to lose a ball bearing and a spring and a little plate thingy.
It goes in there.
So basically what happened when we took the box apart, we've never had one of these apart before, and when we lifted the gear set out of the casing, we obviously lifted up on that selector there, which then popped off the gear, and there's 3 springs and ball bearings that hold, well, that sort of give you the notches on the selector. Anyway, they went flying, and we managed to find some ball bearings that were the right size, but we were struggling with the springs, so we had to order some springs, which have now arrived. Safe to say they've been fitted, so we've now sort of put the gear set and the selectors back together, dropped it back into this is the new casing on the bottom now, so we're now in the process of, we just bolted all the retainers for the selector arms in, and we're nearly at the stage really where it's going to be ready to drop back inside the main gearbox casing. So that's the next step. I think really. Probably worth noting, or at least something we've learnt, is if you're doing this again, what you actually want to do is have the gearbox this way round, and you want to lift the casing off the gearbox. So the top half there, we had it the other way around, we had that piece on the floor, and we were lifting this out of it. But obviously because all the gears are attached to this, which we didn't really realise, you'd be a lot better off doing it this way around, because then it's just the casing which with nothing in it effectively to go on top. So that's the way it's going to be going back together. Right,
For a test fit.
I'm going to go for a test fit before we seal it, just to make sure we don't have any issues that we haven't foreseen.
Oh, nice. Is there a hole to see those selector arms? Oh yeah, hang on, I see the issue. There she is. Okay. Oh, she still hasn't come in. Well, there she is, right, yeah, it's like, it's like tapping. And
yeah, that'll be easy, right. Put it off again. It's not trying to go everywhere.
Funny, that when you got all the tension apart, all over the mating surfaces, for fuck's sake.
It's a novelty. I would recommend that though to anyone. It's only a cheap, nasty test, and we could do. Now that we've got one, we really do need a bigger one. But it really does make you look after your tools and work a lot cleaner when you've got one. You just find yourself putting tools away all the time when you're using them, rather than dragging out all your socket sets all over the floor and then standing on it.
Kicking the box over.
Kicking the box over.
Losing them.
You do tend to clean your tools off before you put them back as well, because you're putting them in your tool tray, so you don't want to get
Doesn't stop you from abusing your tools.
No.
Like using them, like using a pretty good electrical screwdriver to
I
apply sealant.
I suppose you've just got your finger in there, to be honest.
Well, I thought I'd get a better. I wouldn't want to write off a perfectly good pair of gloves. Be more wasteful with your finger as well.
This stuff is supposed to be squeezed out the gun, but we've had it for a bit long, and you get this problem. That's how much of the tube was solid. I only used it the other day. It's like all stuff, when you get it in a big tube, it's good value for money, but unless you use the whole tube at once, it just gets wasted, and it's really quite annoying. Where this is that expensive block size stuff.
Oh. Look at that.
Bloody beauty. Right. So
cut, we've probably forgot something.
Yeah.
Quick.
So we'll go ahead and tighten up all the bolts now.
I'll put the plug back in.
And that'll be the box back together again. But it isn't actually a bad job once you know how it comes apart. It comes apart very easily actually.
Yeah, that way up, not the other way.
So you want to basically start with the transmission like that and pull the top off and it will come straight off.
Yeah. Then ratchet strap your gears so we don't...
Yeah. And it's quite simple. If you fuck up like we did and accidentally rip half a box apart, it takes a bit longer to put it back together.
Yeah.
But even then it's doable, but you can just lose bits as we found out.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful. But that is one gearbox ready to go back together.
Right, she's all back together, all bolted up. So really all I need now is my clutch to turn up. And then all I'm going to have to do, I've got to knock this seal back 10mm. Put the plate over. I'm going to have to cut a small section off of here. Cut this back flush. And then put that bolt on. Bolt the clutch to the flywheel on. I've got a new release arm. Might have a new release arm coming for here, and bolt her all together and get her back on the road. Well, I've had a parcel arrive. I think we best open the old girl up, hadn't us? Well, there she is. It is the new clutch for the old Cummins. New first bearing. That'll be the pressure plate.
Good lighting, Chris.
Friction plate. Nicely worked on. Flywheel. Right, let's get it together.
Right, that's the new flywheel. Oh, sorry, the resurfaced flywheel back in. Chris is just torquing the flywheel bolts there. As you just see the new carrier bearing in the centre of the flywheel there as well to support the input shaft on the gearbox. So you can see it's all nicely skimmed to take the new clutch. Just lifted that in there, it's a heavy bugger. So now it's time to fit the clutch. As you can see, Chris is actually taken to working underneath the Land Rover because it's a much more convenient location to sit down and work on the bell housing end of the motor.
I'm short enough that it works as well.
Right, that's the friction disc and the pressure plate in. We haven't actually got an alignment tool for this, so we're just having to do it visually. Obviously when you put any clutch on a vehicle you want to try and get the friction disc as centred as you can to make your life easier when you're trying to get the gearbox back on, particularly when the gearbox is extremely heavy like this one is and you're fighting with it anyway. If we did these all the time like Peugeots, we would make a tool, cut an impact shaft out of the box or something, but we aren't very often doing these, so we'll... Well, the pressure plate is going on for the second time. There was a bit of a fail the first time. On these pressure plates there's little stops that Truck Fix supply. You can just see there and there, and there's obviously 3. They basically hold some of the preload on the pressure plate so that when you're fitting it you're able to actually get it up against the flywheel so you can catch the bolts, so that it isn't, otherwise you're trying to fight without those massive springs. Issue was, as we were tightening it, obviously the pressure came off and it fell off and we managed to fall down inside the bloody pressure plate, and after spending about 10-15 minutes we couldn't get it out. So I had to pull the whole thing off again just to get that one little piece of metal back out, which has now been supplemented with a set of keys I found lying around. So now she's being just lining up again by eye, doing all the bolts back up tight again, and then we'll be sort of ready to line up the tranny, which is going to be fun because it's bloody heavy. Okay, as you can see the gearbox is now back on the back of the engine. That was really quite difficult, to be honest. Not that it's complicated, it's just so heavy. Doing it between 2 of you is really quite difficult. It probably would be easier on ramps with like a you know, a gearbox stand or lift, whatever you want to call it. But it's in there now. We've just caught all the bolts are pretty much in, apart from some side ones, and the tight top and bottom, so it's up flush and it's looking pretty. So now we need to put the clutch slave cylinder back on, and then obviously the gearbox mounts and then the gear selector. Right, well, 'tis another day. So a bit more work on the Land Rover going back together. Obviously the gearbox is back in, you saw before. So we've flushed back the end of the casing. You've just got to take sort of 5 or 6 mil off that, as we did the first time, to give you clearance for the transfer box. Put a new lip seal in the end on that casing, cleaned it all up, and we've just now bolted up the adapter plate. Just a big plate of steel with holes drilled in 2 sets of braces to bolt the transfer box on. We have used longer bolts this time. The bolts that we had in here last time didn't actually go all the way in to the threaded holes on the end casing of the transmission. So they were kind of putting more stress on the sort of the thinner parts of the aluminium casting, whereas now the bolts do actually go right down to the bottom, and the holes which are really into the casting rather than just being on the lugs on the outside of it. So that should significantly strengthen that, I think. And we still think that probably most likely the actual damage was done when we had the offset, well, the incorrect input gear on it that was out of line and everything was flexing. I'd imagine that was actually probably when it was weakened, and it's probably been cracked and weakened ever since then, and then he now really decided to finally give up. So it's now ready to slide the transfer box on and bolt that up tight.
Well, bugger me. It's only been a month, I reckon, for this, maybe longer, for this gearbox to be rebuilt, and she's back together. We did have a little issue where we dropped the spring, not the spring, the little metal plate on top of the gear stick down in the box last night. Got a little niggly over that and went home a bit teasy, but luckily managed to fish that out without having to take the box off, and she's now ready to turn the key. Do you want the honours?
I'll crank her up. Oh, hang on, where's the key?
Keys on the floor.
Fuck's sakes.
Ah.
Where's that gone? Take 2.
Right, he's recovered the keys after dropping them. Well, she still runs. Next question is, does she drive?
Right, we'll see what she drives like. Due to air pressure, she's been laid up for quite a few weeks. 3 hours, sorry. Oh, she moves.
Up first.
Oh, she goes forward and back. Must have put the gearbox back, something like it then. I guess that concludes that video.